Douglas Sterling clinked his crystal champagne glass, demanding silence from Chicago's elite, but his gaze swept right past his wife, Alicia, as if she were merely a shadow in the corner of his gilded penthouse. Outside, the wind howled off Lake Michigan, whipping snow against the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the magnificent mile, but inside, the air was warm, scented with expensive pine and the heavy perfume of old money. Alicia adjusted the sleeve of her deep burgundy velvet gown, standing near the catering entrance. At 55, she possessed a regal stillness that most people mistook for submissiveness. A woman in diamonds nearby whispered loudly enough to be heard, "It's still surprising, isn't it? That Douglas married, well, someone like her. She must be very grateful." Alicia didn't flinch. She had spent 20 years perfecting the art of being the invisible black wife in a room full of white privilege, smiling politely while being erased from her own life. She moved silently toward the bar to refill the ice bucket, her eyes scanning the room with a precision no one noticed. On a digital monitor displaying the company's year-end projections, she spotted a decimal error in the Asian market revenue column. It was a rookie mistake, likely made by the new strategic consultant Douglas had hired, but Alicia said nothing. She wasn't paid to think. She was paid to be the ornament that proved Douglas Sterling was a modern, inclusive man. "Douglas, darling, you must tell them about the Zurich expansion," a voice chimed in. It was Tiffany, the 28-year-old consultant. She stood too close to Douglas, her hand resting familiarly on his tuxedo sleeve. Douglas beamed, his face flushed with wine and arrogance. "Ah, yes. Big things are happening," Douglas announced, his voice booming. "We are restructuring. Out with the old, in with the new efficiency." He laughed, a sound that lacked all warmth. Alicia turned away, stepping into the quiet of the kitchen prep area, but the voices carried. She heard the slide of the balcony door opening, followed by hushed whispers. "Is the transfer set?" Tiffany's voice was sharp, stripped of its social sweetness. "Tonight at midnight," Douglas replied, his tone dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "Once the funds hit the offshore holding, the accounts here will show zero. By the time she realizes what happened, we'll be landing." Alicia froze, her hand hovering over the silver ice tongs. There was no doubt who they were discussing. She composed herself, took a breath, and walked back into the party, her face a mask of calm. But as she passed the center of the room, Tiffany spun around, accidentally splashing red wine onto Alicia's velvet skirt. "Oh, I am so clumsy," Tiffany exclaimed, her eyes gleaming with malice. "I'm so sorry, Alicia. I hope that wasn't expensive." Douglas didn't ask if Alicia was all right. He sighed, annoyed. "For God's sake, Alicia, go change. You look like a mess. Don't embarrass me." The humiliation hung heavy in the air, thicker than the cigar smoke. Alicia nodded slowly, not trusting herself to speak. She retreated to the coat room, purportedly to check on a guest's wrap. Her hands didn't tremble as she reached for Douglas's jacket, which hung on the master rack. She needed proof. Her fingers brushed against something stiff in the inner pocket. As the guests departed, Alicia found a crumpled boarding pass in Douglas's jacket pocket, Switzerland one way, for 2 passengers departing tomorrow morning. If you are feeling Alicia's shock right now and you're rooting for her to fight back, please comment the number 8 below to let me know you are still watching. And if you haven't already, I highly recommend you subscribe to the Black King channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a moment of justice. Your support is what helps us continue creating these inspiring stories for you. Now, let's continue and see what Alicia does next. While Douglas snored softly, dreaming of Swiss banks and a new life, Alicia sat awake in the kitchen, the boarding pass resting on the marble counter like a declaration of war. The morning after Christmas brought a heavy, gray silence to Chicago. The city was recovering from the festivities, but inside the penthouse, the tension was suffocating. When Douglas finally emerged, dressed in a sharp business suit rather than holiday loungewear, he didn't even look at her. "Emergency board meeting," he lied, adjusting his silk tie in the hallway mirror. "Don't wait up, Alicia. I might be late." He didn't kiss her goodbye. He simply grabbed his briefcase, the one containing the encrypted hard drives, and walked out the door, confident that his wife would spend the day shopping or organizing the maids. Alicia waited exactly 5 minutes until she saw his limousine disappear into the slushy traffic of Michigan Avenue. She didn't call a driver. Instead, she put on her heavy wool coat and walked 4 blocks against the biting wind to Lou's Diner, a small, retro establishment that smelled of bacon grease and honest work. It was the only place in the city where she felt like a person, not a prop. Sitting in a back booth was Sarah, Douglas's former executive assistant, a young black woman who had been fired 2 days before Christmas for budget cuts. Sarah looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "Mrs. Sterling? You shouldn't be here." "I'm not here as Mrs. Sterling," Alicia said softly, sliding a personal envelope across the cracked Formica table. "I know Douglas didn't give you a severance package. This is from my personal account. It should cover your rent and the boys' tuition for 6 months." Sarah opened the envelope, her hands trembling. She hadn't done anything to earn this favor. It was simply an act of grace. Tears spilled onto her cheeks. He's evil, Alicia. You don't know what he's doing." Sarah fumbled with her phone. "I haven't been locked out of the system yet. I checked the logs this morning because I was angry. It's not just the company accounts. He's liquidating the employee pension fund. He's taking everything." Alicia's expression hardened. "Show me." "I can't access the authorization codes from here," Sarah whispered. "Only the secure tablet has the master key." Alicia stood up, leaving her coffee untouched. She walked briskly to the Sterling Enterprises tower. The glass doors were locked for the holiday, and Henry, the 60-year-old doorman, stood guard inside. He saw her and hesitated. Douglas had given strict orders. No one enters. Alicia placed her hand on the cold glass. She didn't demand entry. She simply mouthed, "How is Martha?" Henry froze. He remembered the specialist surgeon Alicia had quietly paid for when his wife needed a hip replacement last winter, a secret Douglas never knew. Loyalty to a paycheck is one thing. Loyalty to the person who saved your family is another. Henry unlocked the door. "He's upstairs, Mrs. Sterling," Henry murmured, tipping his cap. "And he dropped this in the lobby when he was rushing. I think you should have it." He pulled a sleek black tablet from his podium. Alicia took the device. Her fingers flew across the screen. It was already logged in. The screen flashed a red warning, "Transfer processing, 98% complete." Alicia had less than 10 minutes to stop the theft of a lifetime. Panic is loud, screaming through the veins. But true power is silence. Alicia sat at the head of the empty boardroom table, her phone specifically dialed to a number she hadn't used in decades. The executive suite on the 45th floor was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos unraveling on the tablet screen before her. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass, the gray expanse of Lake Michigan looked like a frozen sheet of iron. Alicia placed the stolen tablet on the mahogany surface, watching the transfer progress bar inch toward completion. 99%. She didn't scramble or shout. She simply pressed the call button on her personal cell phone. "Mr. Henderson," she said when the line clicked open. The voice on the other end was raspy with age, belonging to a lawyer who had retired 10 years ago but still held the deepest secrets of the Sterling family. "Alicia." Henderson coughed, surprised. "It's Christmas, my dear. Is everything all right?" "No, Arthur. It's time. Initiate Protocol 19. There was a heavy pause on the line. Protocol 19 wasn't just a legal maneuver. It was a ghost story Douglas had long forgotten. 25 years ago, when they were just starting out, no bank in Chicago would lend $1 million to a young black woman, no matter how brilliant her business plan was. So Alicia had used her grandmother's inheritance to fund the startup, but she had made a choice that defined her marriage. She let Douglas be the face, the CEO, the white man the world would trust. In exchange, she retained the golden share, a silent, controlling interest buried deep in the original incorporation charter, giving her absolute veto power if the company's ethics were ever compromised. "He's moving the operating capital, Arthur," Alicia said, her voice steady. "And the pension funds." "All of it." "I see," Henderson replied, his tone shifting from grandfatherly to professional. "I am accessing the mainframe now. You have the authorization key." "I do." Alicia typed a sequence of numbers into the lawyer's remote portal on her laptop. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text from Douglas. "Taking off now. See you in a week. Don't wait up." He thought he had one. He thought she was at home crying over a cold dinner. Alicia watched the transfer bar on the tablet. It hit 100%. For a second, the screen turned green, indicating success. Then, as Henderson's code took effect, the screen flashed a violent warning red. Transaction denied. Fraud alert. Assets frozen by majority shareholder. The authorization was instantaneous. The offshore accounts in Zurich were flagged. The money didn't leave Chicago. It bounced back into a secure escrow account controlled solely by the original investor, Alicia Washington Sterling. She leaned back in the heavy leather chair, exhaling a breath she felt she had been holding for 20 years. Her phone rang, the screen displaying "Husband." She answered calmly as Douglas screamed, "Alicia, the account is locked." "What did you do?" She replied, "I didn't do anything, partner. The owner did." That was the ultimate checkmate. If you are cheering for Alicia's brilliant move right now, please drop the number 8 in the comments to let me know you're still watching. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Black King and hit that notification bell. You definitely don't want to miss Douglas's reaction in the next chapter. Your support helps us continue creating inspiring content like this. Now, let's continue. The private jet sat heavily on the tarmac at O'Hare Airport, grounded not by the blizzard raging outside, but by a single digital signature from the woman Douglas had called useless only hours before. 40 minutes later, the double doors of the Sterling Enterprises boardroom crashed open. Douglas Sterling marched in, snow melting on the shoulders of his cashmere coat, his face a mask of purple rage. Behind him trailed Tiffany, looking pale and checking her phone nervously. The room was full. The entire board of directors had gathered on short notice, but the chair at the head of the table was already occupied. Alicia sat there. She wasn't wearing her usual understated knitwear. She wore a sharp, tailored black suit, her hair pulled back, looking every inch the architect of the empire they sat within. "Get out of my chair," Douglas barked, though his voice cracked slightly. "And someone tell me why my access codes are invalid. I am the CEO of this company." "Correction," Alicia said, her voice cutting through the room like a cold draft. "You were the CEO. As of 10 minutes ago, the board has moved to suspend you pending an investigation into embezzlement." "Embezzlement? I built this." Douglas slammed his fist on the table. He turned to the board members, men he had golfed with for decades. "You're listening to her? She's a housewife. She doesn't know the difference between a balance sheet and a grocery list." Alicia didn't shout. She simply slid a yellowed, leather-bound folder across the polished mahogany table. It stopped perfectly in front of Douglas. He opened it, and his color drained away. It was the original incorporation charter from 1995. "Read Clause 4A, Douglas," Alicia said softly. "The founding investor retains the golden share, granting 51% voting rights in the event of ethical breach." "You forgot where the seed money came from, didn't you? My grandmother didn't scrub floors for 40 years, so you could steal her legacy to fund your midlife crisis." The room went silent. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had always assumed the money was Douglas's. The revelation that a black woman's inheritance was the foundation of their tech empire changed the entire gravity of the room. Desperate, Douglas sneered, his mask of civility slipping completely. "This is ridiculous. You can't run a billion-dollar tech company, Alicia. You're just the diversity hire I married." A gasp went around the table. The chairman of the board, a stern man named Miller, stood up. "That is enough, Douglas. The evidence of the attempted unauthorized transfer to Zurich is irrefutable. We have voted. You are out." Douglas looked around wild-eyed, searching for an ally, but finding only closed faces. The power had shifted, not by force, but by the weight of truth. Security arrived to escort Douglas out, and when he turned to Tiffany for support, she stepped back, pulling her hand away. "I don't date bankrupt men, Douglas," she whispered, leaving him alone in the room. The fall from grace wasn't a slow slide for Douglas Sterling. It was a cliff dive that hit every jagged rock of reality on the way down. 3 weeks had passed since the boardroom showdown, and the Chicago winter had deepened, burying the city in gray slush. The phones at the Sterling penthouse, which Douglas was currently barred from entering, rang incessantly, but this time, the calls were not for him. In a twist of irony that mirrored the Christmas party where he had silenced his wife, Douglas now found himself silenced by society. His friends from the country club didn't return his texts. Tiffany, the woman who had urged him to empty the accounts, had issued a public statement claiming she was a victim of manipulation, effectively erasing their relationship to save her own consulting career. Inside the Sterling Tower, the atmosphere had shifted from fear to warmth. Alicia sat in the CEO's office, but she had kept the door wide open, something Douglas never did. Across the desk sat Sarah, the executive assistant Douglas had fired. "You're rehired, effective immediately," Alicia said, sliding a contract across the desk. "With full back pay and a 10% raise." "And Sarah?" "I've established a new oversight committee for the pension fund. No one will ever threaten your retirement again." Sarah wiped a tear from her cheek. "Thank you, Mrs. Sterling. We were all so scared." "Call me Alicia," she replied with a gentle smile. "We have a lot of work to do to clean up this mess." Downstairs, the reality for Douglas was far colder. He stood outside the revolving brass doors, shivering in a coat that was no longer pressed by a valet. He tried to swipe his access card, but the light blinked an unforgiving red. He pushed against the glass, waving frantically at the security desk. Henry, the doorman, walked over slowly. He didn't rush to open the door as he had done for 20 years. He stood on the other side of the glass, his face impassive. "Open the door, Henry." "It's a mistake," Douglas shouted, his breath fogging the glass. "I need to talk to my wife." Henry cracked the door just an inch, not to let him in, but to hand him a thick manila envelope delivered by a courier moments ago. "Mrs. Sterling is in a meeting, sir. She asked me to give you this. And my name isn't Driver or Boy. It's Henry." Douglas tore open the envelope. It was the divorce settlement. His eyes scanned the legal jargon until they hit the clause regarding infidelity and financial fraud. It was the exact ironclad adultery clause Douglas had insisted on inserting years ago to protect his own fortune from gold diggers. Now, that very weapon had turned against him. Because he had been caught attempting to embezzle marital assets and committing adultery, the prenuptial agreement awarded him absolutely nothing. He looked up stunned, but the lock on the door clicked shut. Henry turned his back and walked away. Alicia watched from her high office window as Douglas walked away into the gray Chicago slush, a small figure disappearing into the city he thought he owned. She felt no malice, only the quiet peace of closure. Spring finally arrived in Chicago, melting the heavy ice off the lake and revealing the sturdy, fertile ground beneath, much like the truth about who really built the Sterling Empire. 4 months had passed since the corporate storm, and the city was blooming with April tulips. In the South Side, a neighborhood often overlooked by billionaires like Douglas, a crowd had gathered in front of a renovated brick warehouse. Alicia stood at the podium, the spring breeze catching the hem of her bright yellow dress. She looked nothing like the shadowy figure in the velvet gown from Christmas Eve. Today, she was radiant, her face gracing the cover of Forbes not as a wife of, but as innovator of the year. Miles away, in a cramped break room of a logistics center, a man in a gray uniform ate a sandwich while watching the news on a small, mounted TV. It was Douglas. He looked older, tired, the arrogance scrubbed away by the reality of minimum wage. On the screen, the reporter asked Alicia about her success. Douglas stopped chewing. He turned to a younger coworker sitting nearby. "I knew her once," he murmured, his voice thick with regret. "She was smarter than all of us combined. We just didn't want to see it." Back at the ceremony, Alicia wasn't talking about stock prices. She was speaking to a group of young, wide-eyed students from the community. "They will tell you that you don't belong in the room," Alicia said, her voice ringing clear without a microphone. "They will look past you. But you must remember, your value does not decrease based on someone else's inability to see your worth." A young black girl, no older than 16, pushed her way to the front. She clutched a notebook to her chest, looking at Alicia with awe. Alicia stepped down from the stage and approached her. "What's your name?" "Maya," the girl whispered. "I want to start a business, but I don't have any money." Alicia reached into her bag and pulled out a worn, leather-bound journal, the very same one she had used to draft the original Sterling business plan 25 years ago. "Money is just fuel, Maya. Ideas are the engine. Take this." She handed the notebook to the girl. Write your own story. And when you're ready, come find me. The crowd cheered as Alicia moved to the covered sign above the entrance. Most people expected her to name the building after herself, the Alicia Washington Tower. It was the standard move for a wealthy CEO. But Alicia grabbed the rope and pulled. The canvas fell away to reveal the bronze lettering, the Henry and Sarah Center for Innovation. In the front row, Henry the doorman and Sarah the executive wiped tears from their eyes. Alicia had dedicated her legacy not to her ego, but to the people who had shown her kindness when she had nothing but a title. As Alicia walked out into the warm sunlight, she smiled, realizing that the best revenge wasn't destroying her enemy, but building a world where people like him could no longer hurt people like her.